everyone, and welcome back to English as a Second Language. I'm David, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. If you're new to our channel, welcome, and if you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back. Today, we're continuing our business and finance series, and I have a really interesting story to share with you. We're going to talk about how Starbucks became a global brand. Now, I know what you're thinking, David, everyone knows Starbucks, and you're absolutely right. But do you know how a small coffee shop in Seattle became one of the most recognizable brands in the world? That's what we're going to explore today. Before we dive in, I want to mention that we'll be reviewing some really useful business vocabulary at the end of the episode. Words and phrases that you'll hear in business conversations all the time. So make sure you stay until the end. Just this morning, I was walking past a Starbucks, actually. There are 3 of them within 2 blocks of my apartment. And I started thinking about how incredible their success story really is. I mean, think about it. Coffee has been around for centuries, right? People have been drinking coffee long before Starbucks existed. So how did one company manage to change the way the entire world thinks about coffee? That's exactly what we're going to find out today. We'll look at how Starbucks started, what made them different, and how they grew from one small store to over 30,000 locations worldwide. It's a fascinating business story, and I think you'll find it really interesting. So grab your coffee, whether it's from Starbucks or not, and let's get started. The story of Starbucks begins in 1971 in Seattle, Washington. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Starbucks wasn't originally a coffee shop where you could sit and drink coffee. It was actually just a store that sold coffee beans and equipment. Can you imagine? The first Starbucks was basically a place where you could buy coffee beans to take home and make your own coffee. The company was founded by 3 friends, Jerry Baldwin, Zev Sigla, and Gordon Bowker. They were inspired by a Dutch immigrant named Alfred Pete, who had opened a small coffee shop in California. Pete taught them about high-quality coffee beans and how to roast them properly. The 3 friends decided to bring this concept to Seattle. They chose the name Starbucks after a character in the famous novel Moby Dick. The character's name was Starbuck, and he was the first mate on the ship. The founders thought it sounded strong and maritime, which made sense since Seattle is a port city. For the first 10 years, Starbucks remained a small local business. They had just a few stores in Seattle, and they focused on selling high-quality coffee beans to customers who wanted to make great coffee at home. They built a reputation for having the best coffee beans in the city, but they were still a long way from becoming a global brand. Everything changed in 1982 when a young marketing executive named Howard Schultz joined the company. Schultz had been working for a Swedish company that made kitchen equipment, and he had noticed that a small coffee store in Seattle was buying a lot of their products. That store was Starbucks. Schultz was curious about this company, so he visited Seattle to meet the founders. He was immediately impressed by their passion for coffee and their knowledge about different types of beans. He could see that they had something special, but he also saw an opportunity to make it even bigger. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. In 1983, Schultz took a business trip to Italy, and this trip completely changed his vision for Starbucks. In Italy, he discovered something that didn't exist in America at that time, the coffee bar culture. In Italian cities, Schultz saw small coffee bars on every corner where people would stop by in the morning, order an espresso, chat with the barista, and then continue with their day. These weren't just places to buy coffee, they were social gathering places where people connected with each other and with their community. Schultz realized that Americans were missing this experience. In America, coffee was something you made at home or maybe bought from a diner, but it wasn't a social experience. He saw an opportunity to bring the Italian coffee bar concept to America, but he wanted to make it uniquely American. When Schultz returned to Seattle, he was full of excitement about this new idea. He went to the Starbucks founders and proposed that they should start serving coffee drinks, not just selling beans. He wanted to create a place where people could come to enjoy high-quality coffee in a comfortable, welcoming environment. But here's the thing, the founders weren't interested in this idea. They liked their business model, they were comfortable selling coffee beans, and they didn't want to get into the restaurant business. They thought serving coffee would be too complicated and would take away from their focus on quality beans. Schultz was disappointed, but he didn't give up. He was so passionate about this idea that he decided to start his own coffee shop company. In 1985, he left Starbucks and opened his own coffee bar called Il Giornale. The name is Italian and means the daily or the newspaper. Il Giornale was designed to recreate the Italian coffee bar experience in America. Schultz hired baristas who were trained to make high-quality espresso drinks. He created a warm, inviting atmosphere where people could sit and enjoy their coffee. And most importantly, he focused on customer service, making sure that every customer felt welcome and valued. The concept was successful, but Schultz still had his eye on Starbucks. He believed that the Starbucks brand was stronger and more established than his new Il Giornale brand. In 1987, he got his chance. The original founders of Starbucks decided they wanted to focus on their other business interests, so they put Starbucks up for sale. Schultz saw this as his opportunity. He raised money from investors and bought Starbucks for $3,800,000, 0 cents. Then he did something interesting. He combined his Il Giornale concept with the Starbucks brand. He kept the Starbucks name and logo, but he transformed the stores into the coffee bars he had envisioned. This was the real beginning of the Starbucks we know today. Under Schultz's leadership, Starbucks began to expand rapidly. But their expansion wasn't just about opening more stores. It was about creating a consistent experience that customers could rely on. One of the key strategies that made Starbucks successful was their focus on what they called the third place concept. Schultz believed that people needed a place that was neither home nor work, a third place where they could relax, meet friends, or just enjoy some quiet time. Starbucks stores were designed to be that third place. To create this third place experience, Starbucks paid attention to every detail. They chose comfortable furniture, played carefully selected music, and even considered the lighting in their stores. They wanted customers to feel like they were in a living room, not a fast food restaurant. They also invested heavily in training their employees, who they called partners instead of employees. This was more than just a name change. Starbucks offered their workers benefits that were unusual for part-time retail workers, including health insurance and stock options. They believed that happy employees would provide better customer service, which would lead to loyal customers. Another important part of Starbucks' strategy was their commitment to quality. They continued to focus on high-quality coffee beans, and they developed their own roasting process. They also created a variety of drinks that customers couldn't get anywhere else. The Frappuccino, for example, became hugely popular and helped differentiate Starbucks from other coffee shops. As Starbucks grew, they also became very good at choosing locations. They looked for high-traffic areas where busy people would want to stop for coffee. They opened stores in business districts near universities, in shopping centers, and eventually in airports and hospitals. The goal was to be convenient for customers wherever they were. By the 1990s, Starbucks was expanding beyond Seattle to other cities across the United States. They went public in 1992, which means they started selling shares of the company to investors on the stock market. This gave them the capital they needed to expand even faster. But Schultz had even bigger ambitions. He didn't just want Starbucks to be successful in America, he wanted it to be a global brand. In 1996, Starbucks opened its first international store in Tokyo, Japan. This was a big risk because the Japanese market was very different from the American market. However, Starbucks was smart about their international expansion. Instead of trying to impose American culture on other countries, they adapted their concept to fit local tastes and preferences. In Japan, for example, they offered more food options and created a quieter, more contemplative atmosphere that appealed to Japanese customers. The international expansion was successful, and Starbucks began opening stores in countries around the world. They entered the UK, China, South Korea, and many other markets. Each time, they studied the local culture and adapted their approach accordingly. One of the most interesting aspects of Starbucks' global expansion was how they handled different markets. In some countries, they opened company-owned stores. In others, they worked with local partners through franchising agreements. A franchise is when a company allows another business to use their brand name and business model in exchange for fees and royalties. As the expansion to China was particularly significant. When Starbucks first entered China in 1999, many people thought it would be difficult because China has a strong tea culture, not a coffee culture. But Starbucks was patient and persistent. They positioned coffee as a modern, sophisticated beverage that appealed to young, urban Chinese consumers. Today, China is Starbucks' second largest market after the United States, with thousands of stores across the country. This shows how a company can successfully introduce a new product to a market that initially seems unsuitable. Throughout their expansion, Starbucks faced many challenges. They had to deal with increased competition as other companies tried to copy their success. They also faced criticism about their impact on local, independent coffee shops. Some people argued that Starbucks was hurting small businesses and homogenizing coffee culture. Starbucks also had to navigate economic downturns. During the 2008 financial crisis, for example, many consumers reduced their spending on luxury items like expensive coffee drinks. Starbucks had to close some stores and find ways to offer more affordable options while still maintaining their premium brand image. Another challenge was maintaining consistency as they grew. With thousands of stores around the world, it became increasingly difficult to ensure that every customer had the same high-quality experience. Starbucks invested heavily in training programs and operational systems to address this challenge. Despite these challenges, Starbucks continued to innovate and adapt. They introduced new products like bottled frappuccinos that customers could buy in grocery stores. They developed mobile apps that allowed customers to order and pay for their drinks before arriving at the store. They also began offering more food options and expanding their hours to serve customers throughout the day. One of the most important innovations was their loyalty program. Customers could earn points, or stars, for every purchase, and these stars could be redeemed for free drinks and food. This program helped increase customer retention and encouraged people to visit Starbucks more frequently. Starbucks also became known for their social responsibility initiatives. They committed to sourcing their coffee beans ethically, supporting coffee farmers in developing countries, and reducing their environmental impact. These efforts helped build brand loyalty among customers who cared about social and environmental issues. Today, Starbucks is truly a global phenomenon. They have over 30,000 stores in more than 70 countries. They employ hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. They serve millions of customers every day, and they've fundamentally changed the way people think about coffee. But perhaps most importantly, Starbucks created a new category of business. They weren't just selling coffee, they were selling an experience. They showed that customers were willing to pay premium prices for products that made them feel good, not just products that satisfied their basic needs. The success of Starbucks inspired countless other companies to think about their businesses differently. Today, many companies focus on creating experiences and building emotional connections with their customers, not just selling products. Starbucks also demonstrated the power of branding. They showed that a strong brand could command higher prices and customer loyalty even in a competitive market. The Starbucks logo is now one of the most recognizable symbols in the world, and the company is valued at tens of billions of dollars. Looking back at this incredible journey, what can we learn from Starbucks' success? First, the importance of vision and persistence. Howard Schultz saw an opportunity that others missed, and he was willing to take risks to pursue his vision. Even when the original founders weren't interested in his ideas, he found a way to make them happen. Second, the value of focusing on the customer experience. Starbucks didn't just sell coffee, they created an environment where customers wanted to spend time. They understood that people don't just buy products, they buy experiences and feelings. Third, the importance of adapting to local markets while maintaining a consistent brand identity. As Starbucks expanded internationally, they learned to respect local cultures while still delivering the core Starbucks experience. Fourth, the power of investing in employees. By treating their workers as partners and offering good benefits, Starbucks created a workforce that was motivated to provide excellent customer service. And finally, the importance of continuous innovation. Starbucks never stopped looking for ways to improve their products, their services, and their customer experience. They were always willing to try new things and adapt to changing consumer preferences. Before we wrap up, let me ask you a few questions to help you think about what we've discussed today. First, what do you think was the most important factor in Starbucks' success? Was it their focus on quality, their customer experience, their expansion strategy, or something else? Second, Starbucks successfully introduced coffee culture to countries like China, where tea was traditionally more popular. Can you think of other examples where companies have successfully changed consumer behavior in different markets? Third, what role do you think branding played in Starbucks' success? How important is it for a company to have a strong, recognizable brand? And finally, if you were starting a business today, what lessons from the Starbucks story would you apply to your own company? As promised, let me quickly review some of the key business vocabulary we've covered today. We talked about expansion, which means growing a business by opening new locations or entering new markets. We discussed franchising, which is when a company allows others to use their brand and business model. We mentioned brand loyalty, which describes customers who consistently choose one brand over competitors. We also talked about market penetration, which is how much of a market a company has captured. We discussed customer retention, which means keeping existing customers happy so they continue to buy from you. And we talked about premium pricing, which is when companies charge higher prices for products that are perceived as higher quality or more prestigious. These are all important concepts in business English, and you'll hear them in many different contexts. I encourage you to practice using these words in your own conversations about business. Well, that's our story of how Starbucks became a global brand. I hope you found it interesting and useful for your English learning. It's amazing to think that what started as a small coffee bean store in Seattle became one of the most successful companies in the world. The story of Starbucks shows us that with vision, hard work, and the right strategy, it's possible to build something truly extraordinary. It also shows us how important it is to understand your customers and give them what they really want, not just what they think they want. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode in our Business and Finance series. I really enjoyed sharing this story with you, and I hope it helps you with your English learning journey. Remember, learning English is like building a business. It takes time, patience, and consistent effort, but if you keep working at it, you'll see amazing results. Every conversation you have, every podcast you listen to, every new word you learn is bringing you closer to your goals. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe to English as a Second Language. It really helps us reach more learners like you. And if you have suggestions for future topics in our business and finance series, please let me know in the comments below. Next time, we'll be exploring another fascinating business story, so make sure to come back and join me. Until then, keep practicing your English, keep learning, and remember, you're doing great. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.